Here's the interior of a 2025 Dodge Charger. Like most American cars of the last few decades, it has bucket seats with a console. But back in 1961, when the bench seat was king, driving a car like this Oldsmobile Starfire meant you wanted more than just a ride. You wanted to make a statement. The history of bucket seats is today's topic here on Hubcap Club. According to Wikipedia, a bucket seat is a car seat contoured to hold one person, distinct from a flat bench seat designed to hold multiple people. Here's one of the earliest examples, a Belgian Germain limousine from 1898. The English term bucket seat likely came from the French siège-baquet, or washtub seat. The term came into use at the turn of the 20th century, but details and dates are hard to pin down. Some sources claim this term first appeared in the 1902 edition of Baudry de Saunier's annual General Manual of the Automotive Industry, but I couldn't find a copy to confirm. I did find a listing in the glossary of the 1907 edition with a line drawing to illustrate. In automobiles, particularly when used for racing, the front seat, instead of being a bench seat for two, is often replaced by two separate seats, somewhat resembling armchairs, called bucket seats. Most early cars had bench seats that spanned the width of the car. I'm not sure which American car was first with individual front seats, but three early examples are the 1902 Packard Model F, the 1903 National Gasoline Model A, and the 1904 Oldsmobile Light Tonneau. The earliest use of the term bucket seats in America that I could document was in 1906, for a motorboat. 4 individual bucket seats with aisle between and one wide rear seat, the advertisement boasts. The earliest mention of bucket seats in an automobile I located is for this 1907 Pope Hartford Model L runabout, which featured 2 bucket seats in front, third seat removable. The 1907 Imperial went a step further, offering a car with 4 individual bucket seats. Over the next few decades, some American sport and luxury cars continued to be outfitted with bucket seats, like this 1932 Stutz Super Bearcat. I don't see any contouring on these seat cushions, but at least you couldn't slide around too much in this snug cabin. Across the pond, European and British sports cars, like this 1938 Jaguar S100, defined the classic sports car interior, but again with flat seat cushions. And don't forget that Jeeps, the ubiquitous workhorse vehicles of World War II, featured bucket seats, again with no contouring to keep the driver and passenger in place, even though there were no doors on the vehicle. Offered for sale to civilians starting in late 1945, the Willys Jeep CJ2A was essentially America's first sport utility vehicle. So here's where we have to have the talk about what should be considered a bucket seat. Yes, the original definition specified the seat should have some contouring to keep the driver and passenger in place. But flat cushioned car seats that accommodate only one person have been called bucket seats for generations by both car makers and car owners, so I will too. As always, the comments are wide open for dissenting opinions, which I welcome. Anyway, here in the US, the bench seat reigned supreme. Americans had big families, and they appreciated being able to sit 3 abreast in that wide expanse of front seat. Romantic couples also appreciated how bench seats facilitated amorous activities. But not everyone wanted a large car that seated 6. Some people wanted a small, sporty 2-seater. Eventually, U.S. car makers took notice. As America entered the 1950s, interest in imported sports cars intensified. GIs who served in Britain and Europe during World War II loved the small, nimble, bucket seat-equipped roadsters they encountered overseas and snapped them up as they were imported into the U.S. There were also a few extremely limited production American sports cars built during the late 40s and early 50s, including the Curtiss, Crosley Hotshot, Nash Healey, Cunningham C3, and Kaiser Darrin. Sorry for digressing, but it's impossible for me to mention the Kaiser Darrin, designed by legendary designer Dutch Darrin, without commenting on its cool pocket doors that slide into the front fenders. I'm not a fan of this car's styling overall, but pocket is my favorite kind of door. Yet they're not really practical for cars. They only work here because the Darrin is a roadster without side glass, and it has an incredibly long hood. The interior is very nice, with a padded dash and transmission tunnel, and some generous bolstering on the seatbacks. Looks like the driver's seat got some serious use over the years. Maybe this is one of the 6 that were fitted with Cadillac V8s. 1953 saw the introduction of the first post-war mass-produced sports car, the Chevy Corvette. This first version fell a little short of the mark with its inconvenient side curtains, underpowered 6-cylinder engine, and Powerglide automatic transmission, but it did have a very sporty interior with its 2-tone dash, floor shift, and bucket seats. Check out the floor-mounted shifter and its backward shift pattern with reverse on top and park on the bottom. The 1955 Ford Thunderbird, Ford's answer to the Corvette, had roll-up windows and offered a manual transmission with floor shift, but strangely didn't have bucket seats. That would change in 1958, as we'll see in a minute. Sports cars are one thing, but how did bucket seats find their way into larger American cars? One major reason is the explosion of one-off concept or dream cars that car companies built in the 1950s. Concept cars were intended to preview features that would appear on future production models. Big crowds attended car shows across the country where these futuristic vehicles were displayed. GM introduced the influential LeSabre and Buick XP300 concept cars in 1951. As you can see, the LeSabre's futuristic interior had the trifecta of features that epitomized sporty cars of the 1960s. Bucket seats, a console between the seats, and a console-mounted shift lever. Really ahead of its time. Same for the XP300, which has a gear selector for its Dynaflow transmission that looks similar to some still made today. I think there's a strong case to be made that dream cars introduced the idea of bucket seats in medium and full-size cars and primed the public to want them as an option. Originally, bucket seats were both for comfort and to keep you in your seat during spirited driving. But in the atomic age, bucket seats symbolized youth, excitement, sportiness, trendiness, daring race car drivers, glamorous movie stars, pop singers, baseball players, cool uncles, and the list goes on. Bucket seats even made the humble Volkswagen Beetle seem hip and trendy. The pump was primed for buckets to enter the mainstream. In 1958, bucket seats finally appeared in 2 larger American cars, the newly upsized Ford Thunderbird and the Pontiac Bonneville. The Thunderbird was enlarged to a 4-seater unitized body, as Ford executives were convinced a 2-seater would never generate enough volume to be profitable. This second-generation version is informally known as the Square Bird. The 58 T-Bird was the first American personal luxury car with bucket seats and console, although it had a conventional column shift lever. This is the American car that defined what a sporty, yet luxurious, cockpit-styled interior should look like. The console extended back to the rear seats. Although the rear seats were not buckets, they're clearly meant to accommodate only 2 passengers. Although the T-Bird came standard with Ford's most powerful V8, a 390 cubic inch with 300 horsepower, it was marketed more for its luxury car features rather than its high performance. But lest you think the T-Bird was the first sporty luxury car with a driver-centric cockpit-style interior, the French Facel Vega had it back in 1955. The 1958 Pontiac Sport Convertible took a different approach. No console, but bucket seats for both front and rear passengers. This was a special trim option for the standard full-size Pontiac, not a unique body style like the Thunderbird. Because there's no console or floor shifter, there's a lot of space between these front seats. This car would not be much fun on a date at the drive-in theater. Looking at this brochure, you'd think the floor was as flat as the center aisle of an airliner, but here's a photo to disabuse you of that notion. The backseat layout is pretty strange too. It would have been more usable if they had used a single cushion or added a center armrest instead of that recessed carpeted strip. Chrysler Corporation tried something interesting across its lineup for 1959. Plymouth, Dodge, DeSoto, Chrysler, and Imperial were all available with swing-out seats. I somehow don't think these seats would meet current safety standards. Here they are on a Plymouth Sport Fury convertible. Chrysler played it safe and didn't really go full bucket. as the center section is upholstered just like the seats and can serve as a third seat in a pinch. Cadillac offered optional bucket seats on the Eldorado Biarritz convertible for the first time in 1959. The layout was similar to the previous year's Bonneville, except that the back seat was a normal bench. Here's a 1960 Eldo with the same treatment. That red interior is stunning. For 1960, the Chrysler 300F was the first letter car to sport swivel-out bucket seats plus a console that extended all the way back between the rear seats and offered padded center armrests, both front and back. Expensive as a Cadillac, the 300F was the gentleman's muscle car and probably the fastest automobile sold in America for 1960. Its 413 cubic inch wedge engine with cross-ram manifold generated 375 horsepower. When equipped with the optional 4-speed transmission and floor shifter, the burly Chrysler created the template for 1960 muscle cars: bucket seats, console, and 4 on the floor. Even more cars joined the bucket seat club in 1961. This was the final year for the finned Studebaker Hawk before it was restyled as the handsome GT Hawk for 1962. Not much new this year for the Hawk, except an option to add bucket seats and 4 on the floor for the first time in a Studebaker. 1961 also saw the introduction of the Oldsmobile Starfire, a personal luxury car based on the full-size Olds. Its beautiful interior featured a console with storage and what I believe is the first floor-mounted automatic gear selector in a full-size American car. I know this feature had appeared years earlier on Corvettes and two-seater Thunderbirds. By 1962, there would be a number of cars offering optional floor shifters for your slush box. By the way, I want to remind you that I'm a real person who does actual research and not a disembodied AI voice. And, whenever possible, I try to find contemporaneous sources like newspapers, magazines, advertisements, and brochures. I'm not claiming to always get everything right, but it's not for lack of trying. This takes a lot of time and effort. If you appreciate this level of detail, I hope you'll express that appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. It really helps. Thanks. When the Chevrolet Corvair was introduced for 1960, it was bench seats only. Seemed strange, since the rear engine configuration was obviously intended to woo buyers away from the Volkswagen Beetle. But halfway through the model year, Chevy introduced the Corvair Monza with bucket seats and available 4 on the floor. This is a 1961 version. The seats were too wide to allow a center console. The 1961 compacts from Buick, Olds, and Pontiac also offered coupes with bucket seats as a mid-year introduction to the lineup. Here's a 61 Buick Skylark. The 1961 Comet S22 was another compact with bucket seats and a shortened console between the seats that didn't extend up to the dashboard. Like so many sport packages of the 60s, it was only cosmetic, featuring the same mechanicals as other Comets. And as a footnote, Rambler offered individually adjustable reclining front seats in some of its models, but they weren't referred to as buckets. I wonder if American Motors was afraid that bucket seats would tarnish their sedate and sensible image. But when I look at this photo of a 61 American, it's hard not to see these as bucket seats. That's about it for the birth of bucket seats in American cars up to and including the 1961 model year. I'm sure I've forgotten a few, so let me know in the comments which cars are on your bucket seat list. In 1962, the floodgates would open, and it seemed that almost every make and model of car had a bucket seat option. I'll save that story for a follow-up episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. That's how you can help this channel grow. If you're feeling generous, support me with a super thanks. And leave a comment. I read them all, and often I learn something new. As always, I would appreciate your suggestions for future topics. For Hubcap Club, I'm Rob.